I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a shocking case of attempted murder involving a wife, a doctor, and a cliff in Hawaii. Here's the story. On a lush hiking trail in Hawaii, a birthday hike for Arielle Konig turned into a desperate fight for survival. According to court documents, her husband, Gerhardt Konig, a prominent anesthesiologist from Maui, allegedly asked her to take a selfie near the edge of a cliff, then pushed her toward the void when she refused. Witnesses claim he beat her with a rock, smashed her face into the ground, and pulled syringes from his bag in a chilling attempt to administer a substance. Arielle later turned to the courts alleging months of mounting sexual and physical abuse, extreme jealousy, and a safe facade shattered behind closed doors. As Gerhardt sits behind a $5 million bond, his community grapples with the betrayal and wonders how a healer became a suspect in an attempted murder plot. This case isn't just a fall from a cliff, it's a fall from grace and trust. A big part of this story is the location where this allegedly happened. It's in Hawaii. Let's take a look. And you're talking about a cliff area where people love to go to take photos. I mean, you take a photo there, you're gonna post it, right? But I'm looking at this and my hands are sweating just looking at the edge of that cliff, looking over. They call it the Pali Lookout, 1,200 feet high. Now, this is a hike. This is in Honolulu. Back in March, they were hiking this trail. Now, there's a sign at that trail that says that the area is closed, but obviously people don't pay attention to it because everyone wants to go there to take those photos, which are absolutely breathtaking. Now, taking a look at the trail, the wife's allegations are that the doctor grabbed her and pushed her towards the edge of that cliff, yelling that he's sick of her. Took a syringe and tried to inject her with something, grabbed a rock, hit her on the head. And then there were other people there that walked up and shouted that they were going to call 911, and that's the allegation that the doctor ran away. But that is one side of the story of what happened there in this beautiful, beautiful trail in Hawaii. But there's still some questions here, and there is our first question in our investigation, which is looking at everything that happened here. Like, what happened on the trail? What is the whole story? Is there more than one side to all of this as well? Here to help answer that question is retired police detective and forensic educator Dr. Mike McCutcheon and legal writer at the crime desk at People magazine, Samira Uzma Sadek is with us as well. Great to have you both here. Thank you so much. Samira, I want to begin with you. But let's do this. I want to take a listen to the prosecutor first, because the prosecutor's got their theory, they've got the burden of proof, etc. Let's take a listen to what we have heard from the prosecutor in this case.
The defendant tried 3 different ways in this case to kill Arielle. First, he tried to push her off the poly. Then he tried to stab her with syringes. And then he moved on to his third way of trying to hit her with the rock. And although Mr. Otake said nobody knows the size of the rock, the police did weigh the rock. It's about the size of a softball. It's somewhere between 14 and 18 ounces in weight. It's a piece of lava rock that's jagged. So it is a dangerous instrument.
Okay, so the charge is here, Samira, attempted murder, right? Doesn't get more serious than that. Trying to commit the ultimate crime here. What do we know about why they were there, what the interaction is, how does it allegedly turn so violent, and you know, what is the vibe? Like, you're going for a walk on a trail, right?
Absolutely, yes. It's, they're out there to celebrate her birthday. This is at the end of March, and they go out on a hike at this, really scenic, pretty famous view. And while they're there, Gerhardt says, I want to take a picture with you at this edge. And she and Arielle is uncomfortable. She says that it's too close to the edge and she doesn't want to take that picture. And she starts to walk away, which is when her husband yells at her, and then he pushes her into the bushes. And there's a struggle. I think one of the things that came up as we were reporting the story is how much Arielle fought during the whole incident, during the alleged attack. And she even said, he's trying to kill me. He's hitting me in the head with a rock. And that's when they were confronted by a hiker whose friend called 911 while, and Gerhardt Konig actually allegedly briefly fled the scene. And there's also more information that came out that we can talk about later in a bit about how he actually made a call to his son immediately after the alleged attack, where he made some pretty incriminating statements.
And Samira, one follow-up on this: the rock was the rock recovered in this case as evidence? Do we know if they actually have the physical rock, or do they just have a description of the rock that was used?
I understand that it was a pretty heavy rock. I am not aware that it was recovered from the scene at the time that we were reporting it. Of course, it's been a few months, and perhaps there's been a bit of an advancement in the investigation.
Let me ask you, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, is there any investigation that would be helpful or useful at the scene where this happened? I understand her testimony. I understand there's going to be testimony from the witnesses as well. But how about in terms of forensic evidence? Is this a case that lends itself to that, or not so much because of where we are?
Well, it's a good question. So there's going to be, or there is always potential for evidence, forensic evidence. One is every contact leaves a trace. That's Locard's theory of exchange. So anytime two items come in contact with each other, something is either going to be taken away or left behind. Now, in this one, we know who the players are, so we're not trying to identify a mystery person. Where I think that the evidence to be recovered is what you asked about, if they have the specific rock. And sounding from the prosecutor, it sounded like they had it. And one of the things they're going to look at that, I'm sure, is if they're on the side of a mountain, there's going to be lots of rocks there. So if they're using different chemicals to test for any DNA or blood evidence on those rocks, that would be how they would be able to determine if this was the specific rock that she was struck with. She did have injuries, and even if it's trace amounts of blood, you would be able to identify those using different chemicals, so that you would have the specific rock that she was assaulted with, for sure.
Now, there's another aspect here. We heard mention of Syringes. He's an anesthesiologist, and allegations involving the drug propofol. I think many folks who watch Court TV through the years remember propofol from the Michael Jackson death case, where Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of killing Michael Jackson by using propofol. But propofol is used every day. It was used a week and a half ago on me when I had my knee surgery. But let's take a listen to the prosecution and the defense talk about propofol, how it relates to this case.
And finally, a group of drugs that was found in a Nike fanny pack at defendant's home on Maui, including propofol, a drug that has been known to cause death in the past. It is a drug used in anesthesiology.
Obviously, he's a medical doctor. He was licensed as an anesthesiologist. This issue of him having medication that anesthesiologists have on Maui, not here on Oahu. Nothing like that was found on Oahu, where this alleged incident took place. You know, that's not unusual that a doctor who practices medicine would have drugs.
All right, Samira, what's the bottom line here with this propofol and the syringes? Is there an allegation that he attempted to kill her through the use of propofol, either in Oahu, where this incident took place, or at some point back home in Maui?
Yeah, so she made it pretty clear, Arielle made it pretty clear from the very beginning of the investigation that she believed that her husband was trying to kill her. She said it, as I mentioned earlier, she said it during the alleged attack to the witness, and then she later made that allegation to authorities. And back at home, back in their home in Maui, there have been allegations of sexual assault in the build-up to this day of the incident. So this is an allegation that Arielle has made several times with regards to her husband.
Mike, it seems that if there's an allegation of syringes, that is like tangible evidence that maybe they can find, maybe they can't find, would be real crucial here. But there was a lapse of time from when the alleged attack took place to when he was actually caught.
Yes, but we're going to look at this case as a whole. Whenever we're looking at evidence, whether it be forensic or circumstantial, we have to look at it at a whole. Is there going to be any, think of your anesthesiologist, is he walking around with his fanny pack filled with syringes of propofol? Of course he's not. And this is clearly pre-planned. He has the plan, and his conflict resolution, which was to kill her, didn't work. His plan, he was attempting to push her off. He's attempting to inject her with a syringe. That doesn't work, and he has to revert to rudimentary stone to try to hit her with the stone. But looking at it as a whole, nobody's walking around with propofol just in case someone needs to do an emergency knee surgery, and you're like, don't worry, I got a syringe of propofol here. That's nonsense. That's absolutely crazy for them to make that argument.
All right, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, always great to see you. Samira is going to stick around. Coming up next, what was going on in the Konigs' relationship?
There's no way, any factor or combination of factors that could keep her safe from him in the future. He tried 3 ways to kill her. He should not be given a chance to do a 4th.
I've committed so many horrific acts over and over and over.
Do you think you deserve to die for murdering those innocent people?
You tell me. I wish more than anything, David, that I would have done something other than the things I've done in my life.
Are you really a changed man, or is this some kind of stunt?
Interview with a Killer. 2-hour season premiere. Saturday night at 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
His adult son, who's 19 years old, who is from a prior marriage, chose to come out here from Pittsburgh and live with him and his wife on Maui on his own accord. He wouldn't do that, obviously, unless Dr. Konig was a loving father, a good father, and a supportive father.
And that's at a bail hearing. Bail hearing, you do whatever you can to try to demonstrate the character of the defendant, and you try to talk about how they're not a flight risk, etc. That was part of the argument that, listen, he's got a son, and his son chose to live with him because he's such a great dad. Okay, now, let's get to some of the claims that have been made by the wife in this case, Arielle, against her husband, Gerhardt Konig. In a petition, this is a petition for a temporary restraining order. She's claiming that in December of 2024, Gerhardt, the husband, accused me of having an affair, which led to extreme jealousy on his part. Since then, he has attempted to control and monitor all of my communications. We have been participating in both couples and individual therapy and counseling. The respondent, meaning Gerhardt, has sexually abused and assaulted me over the last few months. And that's prior to the alleged attempted murder on the cliff. So, next question in our investigation. What was going on in the Konigs relationship? What is going on inside of that household? Joining us to help with our investigation, former law enforcement officer and host of the Strong Enough podcast, Claudia King, journalist and host of the podcast, Crime Writers On, Rebecca Lavoie, with us as well. Claudia, what are your thoughts about what's really going on in this relationship?
It sounds like it was definitely devolving over the last few months, which is kind of typical or could be typical of a domestic abuse relationship. We see that he was jealous and accusing her. So was that because he was doing something wrong? And so he started to wonder if she was as well? Or was it a tactic to maybe make her disappear at some point and then be able to claim she just ran away with her boyfriend?
You know, in Rebecca, in this case, it's going to be about what happened on the cliff, but it's really about what's going on at home and what would lead to that. And any jury hearing the evidence is going to want to know what's going on in this relationship. And she's pretty clear in her allegations that things were really bad, really getting violent, like being sexually assaulted by her husband over the course of months. What are your thoughts about this relationship?
It's interesting to me that all the reporting actually includes that. You know, the AP, for instance, has a policy where they don't name victims of sexual violence unless the victim gives them permission explicitly. She's been very public about these allegations, which I think is very telling. She, you know, got the temporary restraining order, which I think shows that she really is in fear for her safety, even though he is in jail awaiting trial. And, you know, I think what's interesting about the cheating allegations is that is not an uncommon tactic among in relationships where there's coercive control. The allegation of cheating gives the controlling partner permission to be more controlling and gives the other partner sort of a sense of lack of safety, of being monitored, of having to prove themselves over and over again. It's not an atypical dynamic, and it sounds like that's what may have been going on here.
So, Claudia, then we look at, let's go to the day now. With that backdrop, it seems from her perspective and what prosecutors are saying, she thought this was a day to, hey, it's my birthday. We're going to celebrate my birthday. And then they get to that area, which is supposed to be closed off because it's so dangerous, but everybody wants to take a photo there. And then we have this story about a selfie, and it's like a selfie gone wrong. But it seems that there's more to it. What are your thoughts about that moment? Is it like the heat of the moment, the selfie and whatever goes wrong there potentially sets him off? Or is this potentially part of a master plan by this defendant? What do you think is more likely to play out in court?
I think this was definitely a master plan. You mentioned that this was supposed to be a fun day for her birthday, and that also plays true with the whole cycle of violence. The abuser does swing back around to being kind, and I think that he planned this so he was being kind to her in the hopes of getting her on this trip. I feel like the selfie was actually the plan to get her close to the edge and then be able to push her off and just say, oh my gosh, we were taking this selfie and she must have fallen. I think he brought the backup plan in the propofol or whatever was in the syringes or the tiny bottles with him. So I think this was very well thought out by him, and he didn't expect anyone else to be on that trail, and he probably didn't expect her to fight so hard.
Yeah, Rebecca, when we talk about these cases, the ones that often or sometimes go unprosecuted or unsolved are the cases where, and usually people are going on vacation to an exotic place like this. They don't live there, right? They don't live in Hawaii. They might go there. They might go, we've covered cases in the past, suspicious cases, where couples have gone scuba diving and only one comes back up from under the water and it's a terrible accident. You can't prove it. It seems that would be the theory here of prosecutors trying to get her to this area. But if you have this backstory of 2 or 3 months of violence, is that going to be a challenge to convince 12 people that a woman who's been subjected to all this would voluntarily go to this extremely forbidden, dangerous trail with this man who's been assaulting her for months.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a plan. I mean, one of the things that we heard the prosecutor say was that he tried to kill her in 3 different ways in this situation. I think that the pushing off the cliff, the selfie, like you said, Vinny, you cover cases where this kind of thing happens. And, I think that it's sort of in the public consciousness that a terrible accident on a trip is something that people might, think is a terrible accident. Clearly, this woman was extremely lucky that these other hikers came along. And it's not, out of the frame for me that the trail was closed. People weren't supposed to be on it. I'm sure that's something that was known. And that's where he chose to take her. So there's a lot going on here. I don't think ultimately he would have necessarily gotten away with the accident storyline given, the months leading up to it. I'd be surprised if she hadn't confided in someone else. They'd been to therapy, so there were probably notes from the therapy sessions. So yeah, there's a lot going on before then that I think may have foiled this plan anyway.
Big thanks, Claudia King, Rebecca Lavoie. Thank you so much. Always great to have your insights. Still to come, what does Dr. Konig's FaceTime call to his son reveal? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the alleged attempted murder of Arielle Konig. The suspect, her own husband. The crime scene, a beautiful cliff on a Hawaiian hiking trail. Here's the story. They went on a hike in Hawaii with celebration in their hearts. The birthday trip for Arielle Konig should have been joyful, but it spiraled into a nightmare. Authorities say Dr. Gerhardt Konig lured his wife to a steep ridge, then launched a brutal attack. Rock blows to her head, syringes brandished, and a whisper of betrayal echoing in his rage. For years, Arielle alleges the doctor manipulated and abused her while hiding his darkness behind white coats. Now Gerhardt is charged with second-degree attempted murder, his reputation buried beneath a mountain of evidence and accusation. As the legal battle unfolds, one question haunts every witness. How did passion morph into a deadly cliffside confrontation? So this trial, a lot of the evidence will be coming from the victim in the case. She's going to testify about everything that happened on that cliff. You've got a couple of witnesses there as well. The doctor obviously is the accused. He does not have to testify. He's not compelled to do so. But there's something else that becomes a big part of this case, another piece of evidence involving a call that is made by the doctor after this incident on the cliff. It's a FaceTime call to his 20-year-old son. Take a listen to the prosecutor talk about this very important FaceTime call.
Detective Spacek would testify that the defendant was hiding out in the woods for about 8 hours from the time of the incident to the time that the police found him while police were searching the area, that he only attempted to leave the poly area when it was getting to dark. So when the sun was setting, when confronted by the police, the defendant fled and resisted arrest. After the incident and before the police found him, the defendant called his son on FaceTime, told his son that he was going to turn off his phone to avoid the police, that when the police searched the defendant's backpack, they found the cell phone with no SIM card in it and turned off. He told his son that he tried to kill Arielle, that he tried to kill the victim in this case. Second, he gave his son the reason for why, that she had been cheating on him. And third, he told his son that he was going to turn off his phone to avoid the police.
Wow. Okay. This is such important evidence. This is just afterwards. Again, FaceTime call to his son. Now, in the petition for a temporary restraining order, his wife claims that Her husband, Gerhardt, the doctor, said, I just tried to kill Ari, but she got away, and that he wanted to kill himself by jumping off a cliff. This is powerful evidence. All of a sudden, his son becomes a key witness in the case against his father. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. What does Dr. Konig's FaceTime call to his son reveal? We know what the allegations are, what the words are, but what does that reveal about what happened that day on the cliff and what was going on in the relationship and the mindset of the defendant? Here to help answer that question is author and nationally certified mental health clinician Sharonda Brown, and still with us, legal writer at the crime desk at People magazine, Samira Uzma Sadek is still with us. Samira, this becomes such an important piece of evidence, and the son becomes such an important witness. What do we know about the son, the father, their relationship, the relationship with stepmom, and that call? Can you hear me, Samira?
And so I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And yes, so Arielle mentions this in a petition to extend her restraining order that she has learned from investigators that her husband made this call, and there isn't any indication that the call was recorded or anything. So it appears that her stepson and Mr. Gerhardt's son may have volunteered that information, and that alone is pretty big if your own son is coming forward to share something that's this incriminating. And also it leads to the question of whether or not Mr. Konig was planning on taking his own life as part of a murder-suicide pact, or was it something that he was doing after he realized that Arielle survived and might be able to might appear in court against him and would be able to testify against him.
Yeah, those are two significant potential implications of all of this, right? All right, Sharonda Brown, let's break it down a little bit here. Let's presume that this call happens. What does it reveal to you if this call actually took place and everything that's in the application for TRO actually was said?
I think it's a sociopathic move. I think it's the move of manipulation to call him and to say these things in the order in which it was said. One, it suggests that they have a relationship. There was some knowledge of a dad feeling some kind of way towards his wife, and he trusted his son to hear that. He trusted his son to share that information, to share this is what I'm going to do, and this is what's going to happen as a consequence of that. So when you look at the order in which he said these things, cause and effect happens with the mind. So when you're telling someone a story, it's like, this is what happened. She cheated. I tried to do this. And so now I'm going to off myself. It tells the son or your loved one that this happened because of her. So when he hangs up the phone, it's a manipulation tactic so his son can associate the anger or the loss of his dad with Arielle. So it's still a way to make the world mad at her for something that he did. So it's a very sociopathic move when I hear this.
How important is it, Sharonda, to understand the reason, again, if we believe all this, that he was telling the truth, that he wanted to take his own life, the reason behind it, right? Because Samira, I think, rightly pointed out, there's really two scenarios, right? One is this is murder-suicide, or it's, oh my goodness, I didn't get away with this murder, and now I don't want to be dragged into court. What's the significance and the difference of those two potential reasons for wanting to take his own life?
When there's a murder-suicide, typically there isn't a strategic plan to take someone far away. It typically is impulsive. So no one knows it's coming. It happens abruptly. But when there's a plan, that means that there's a level of arrogance there. And when people are very arrogant to that level, the last thing they're going to do is kill themselves. And while we can't predict the future and we don't know what could have happened, we know what did happen. And what did happen was a plan and a call, which seemed like a plea for sympathy and a form of manipulation. So it didn't give me any inclination that this would have been a murder-suicide, because people who are typically suicidal, while they may have a plan, they're mostly impulsive in that way. And there's nothing associated with, we talk about the vows, we talk about the fighting, or her fighting back. There were things that he did not intend to happen. So it was mostly damage control. Is what it appears to be.
And Samira, that the 20-year-old son, has he spoken publicly about any of this? Did he appear in court for any of these hearings? Have we heard anything from him?
The family overall has been extremely tight-lipped about the case, and I haven't seen any testimony or any public statements by the son. But just to say what I said earlier, the fact that investigators know that this phone call happened, I think it's going to be pretty powerful evidence against Mr. Konig in the courtroom. And I also just want to point out something that I missed mentioning earlier, just the language of what Dr. Konig said. He said, "I just tried to kill Ari, but she got away." It wasn't that I almost killed her, which may have implied an accident or something that he could have probably used as a defense. He explicitly said, "I just tried to kill Ari." And I think that specific language is going to be it's going to be pretty big evidence against him if prosecutors are trying to prove premeditation.
Absolutely. You could tell Samira covers a lot of these crime stories over at People magazine. Thanks so much, Samira, Uzma Sadek, and of course, Sharonda Brown. Always great to have your expertise as well. Coming up next, what is Dr. Konig's defense going to be?
The point being, this is going to be a he said, she said trial. It is.
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions. How do you explain it? The worst crime anyone can imagine. Do you feel like you took the fall for this murder? Tell me in your own words, what happened? Let's get started.
Interview with a Killer. New season premieres Saturday at 8 Eastern and Pacific, only on Court TV.
We will be entering a plea of not guilty and asking that the matter be set for jury trial.
Good morning to you, Mr. Something. Good morning, Mr. Nurse. Dr. Konig, good morning to you. Good morning. All of you can be seated. You remain seated for the remainder of the hearing.
Dr. Gerhardt Konig is locked up, but waiting for his day in court, his trial. He was unsuccessful at his bail and bond hearings, but we'll see what happens at the trial. Let's take a look here. This is the attorney for the victim, for the wife. She has an attorney because she was seeking that temporary and then the restraining order. Here's what he had to say about her injuries.
Ms. Konig's doing well. She's still recovering. She still has some injuries, but she's spending time with her family.
So the bottom line is there's actual injuries in this case, and we've heard throughout the course of this hour, we've gone through some of the evidence that prosecutors say that they have, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. What is Dr. Konig's defense going to be? What's the defense here? Here to help with our investigation is criminal defense attorney and former district attorney Matthew Mangino and criminal defense investigator Charles Middlestat. Great to have you both here. I want to play a little bit of the defense attorney for the doctor in court, laying out some themes out there, and then let's talk about it on the other side.
This is an allegation made by his wife, who has now filed for divorce and is seeking full custody of their young children. That we know. We know that her story, from what was presented in their opposition, is that they were on a hike, and at some point in time, she wouldn't take a selfie with him. So he tried to throw her off a cliff and stab her with syringes because of that. That's not for today to judge the credibility of that. That will be for a jury to someday decide if that's a credible story or not. We obviously have our opinions about that. What you have is a situation where they talk about multitudes of ways that he's alleged to have tried to kill her. Well, there's three allegations. That he tried to throw her off a cliff for not taking a selfie, that he tried to stab her with syringes, and that he then beat her severely with a small rock. Those are the three allegations. I'll take those one at a time. No syringes were recovered. No syringes found on the hike, on the trail, anywhere near there. And you can bet your bottom dollar they searched that place very, very carefully. So that's the first allegation. Second allegation, that he tried to throw her off a cliff for refusing to take a selfie. Even the way she describes it in the police report is inconsistent with that. And if you look at the original JDPC, it mentions nothing about being thrown off a cliff. Nothing at all. It says that there was a scuffle and she threw herself to the ground. And that area is a wide area. It's nowhere near, it's not like right on the edge of a cliff. So that's the second allegation. Third allegation is that there was him hitting her with this rock. The rock was recovered. It's a very small rock. And I'll say this, Your Honor. There are two witnesses that the state have provided notice of to us. They, by their own account, saw maybe the last 5% of this alleged incident. One of them says she didn't even see physical contact between the two. The other saw very little. None of them mentioned anything about throwing someone off a cliff or syringes. Neither of them. The point being, this is going to be a he said, she said trial. It is. Now, when you let's take, they mentioned this issue of her injuries. What they failed to mention in their opposition is what the doctors at Queens Hospital noted in the HPD Form 13, I believe, where the doctor fills out, checks the boxes for the police about the injuries. Nowhere in their filing did they mention that two doctors at Queens Hospital noted that there was no substantial risk of death from the injuries, that there was no concussion, and that there was no serious bodily injury that would even make it an assault 1. They do mention a laceration, and yes, she had a laceration, but the laceration was result of conduct would fall into the assault 2 Class C felony category of injuries.
Okay, Charles, I'll begin with you, how you investigate this case, where you're going to go, what you're going to try to uncover. He did leave out one thing, the alleged confession to his 20-year-old son in the FaceTime call. So where are you going, Charles? What are you going to try to figure out here?
Well, I'd leave the confession issue and whether there's any suppression issues there up to the lawyers, and I would be focused. First of all, I'd go out to the scene and gain some understanding about what that looks like in terms of the lay of the land. As defense counsel has already laid out, they clearly plan on making her credibility very much a centerpiece of their defense, and and he in fact points out that the two independent witnesses that have been identified have a very, very minor perspective of the encounter between those two, of the conflict. And so really, it's going to come down to how much of that, the fact that part of her version of the events involves syringes that were not recovered in any way, at least based upon what he's enumerating. And so really picking apart her statement, and that's what I would be focused on, and trying to search for reasonable doubt within that statement, literally pick it apart line by line, do a thorough interview of these witnesses to gain a clear understanding of what their real perspective is from a defense perspective, not just from law enforcement trying to make something fit into their theory and to match the victim's allegation. And then I'd also be looking at some of the other evidence that may exist out there. I think there's been some mention of the defense trying to get hold of some cell phone records, looking at geolocation information, given the fact defense counsel has already sort of teed up the notion that an assault 2 is a more appropriate characterization of what might have occurred here. And so there's some mitigation already going on there and trying to steer it in that direction. And so I think being able to establish that there was some sort of extramarital affair may be very important in this case in terms of establishing that. So I think there's a lot to work with.
Matt Mangino, what's your theme here to the jury for the defense?
Well, Vinny, first of all, I would say before people want to lock away Dr. Konig and throw away the key, I'd say not so fast, because there's some inconsistencies that we can already see here with regard to this whole situation. I mean, number one, she files a protective order, a TRO, puts all this stuff out in the public that's favorable to her, and then says, well, I don't need a hearing when she could be subject to cross-examination. She then asks for her divorce proceedings to be sealed. Why would she want the divorce proceedings to be sealed? We have this talk of a possible affair. I think the idea that you're in a struggle with your husband on the edge of a cliff and he reaches into his bag to pull out some syringes, to poke you with them, to inject you with something, that seems a little inconsistent. It seems a little far-fetched to me, quite frankly. And then you look at these statements. So he talked to his son. We know he talked to his son before he was arrested. He couldn't have talked to him after. He said, I tried to kill your mother. And then we have a police report that says when they confronted him after they arrested him, he said, she's not dead. That seems inconsistent to me. I think there's some things here that the defense can work with that might make this case not as clear-cut as it seems on the surface.
Yeah, the son, interesting about the son, Charles, is that he's the doctor's son and he's the stepson of Arielle in this case. And it seems the only way the FaceTime call gets in the hands of prosecutors, I would think the son would have had to have told them about it.
Yeah, I'd be curious about the relationship between father and son. And of course, in a hearsay statement like that, what is the voluntariness of it? What was the purpose of it? And so I think understanding more about that, do we know, has there been some sort of pretrial hearing? Is that coming in for sure, or is that still something that's being litigated?
Yeah, it's still being litigated, but we do know, at least what the doctor's attorney told the court, was that he has a great relationship with his son, Matt. That, to me, that would make, if the son is going to say that his father admitted these things, that it would make it even more powerful evidence.
Agreed.
Well, it depends on context, certainly. But it seems to me that the statements, at least from the son and from the police immediately after arresting him, do not seem consistent with what Dr. Konig would have known or what he wouldn't have known at that point. The other thing that I think is convenient, and it's in the affidavit before the victim came to Honolulu for the preliminary hearing or the arraignment, she found a fanny pack of syringes and drugs. Well, he's a doctor. It wouldn't be unrealistic to find a fanny pack of syringes and medicine in his home.
They don't make house calls anymore. Who you kidding, Matt? They're not making house calls, anesthesiologists. No. Anyway, Matt Mangino, Charles Middlestat, we're out of time, but thank you both so much. It seems there's much more to this story involving the alleged motive. Is it jealousy, mental illness, or just plain evil? It's a question I certainly have, but will the jury also wonder? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation